Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified. Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast Channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a film, we're here to get your content on television. On Channel 22, we bring you live and replay coverage of government meetings and other town updates. A third channel, Blue Hawk Media, is operated by SAU 16 and can be found on Channel 8, with all your school sports, events, and meetings. You can watch Exeter TV online at exeternh.tv, Apple TV, and on Roku. Find us on social media for extra content. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to get notified about live streams and new content. Tune in to our platforms every other Friday to watch the Exeter Biweekly Report, with recaps of recent events, updates from town departments, and messages from nonprofits in your area. If you head to our website, exeternh.tv, we invite you to sign up to our newsletter to receive monthly updates about new content, upcoming meetings, and more. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch Exeter TV and hope that you tune in to our other content as well.
December 19th meeting of the River Advisory Committee. And for starters, we should do a roll call so that the recording secretary who may be listening on recording will know who's here. Okay.
Sure. Warren Biggins, Phillips Exeter.
Rod Borden, Exeter.
Lionel Ingram, Exeter.
Dick Huber, Exeter.
Nico Papakostin, Select Board Rep.
Terry Harmon, Exeter.
Trevor Matera, Conservation Commission Rep.
Very good. Okay, the first order of business after convening the meeting is to look at the minutes of September 19th, 2024. And there is an issue, because it says on my copy of the draft minutes for September 19th, Mr. Ingram motioned to approve the July 18th, 2024 meeting minutes as amended. Mr. Borden seconded the motion. No vote was taken. The motion failed. That has never happened in our history. But in any case, here is a copy of the approved minutes on the website. Now, if I can get that to come up. These are July 18th approved minutes. So I don't know what to do about this, but when we're approving these draft minutes, I think that should be changed to say that that was approved. But if the recording doesn't indicate how it was voted, then, normally he says, it was approved with a.
Why don't we just disregard it? That's the one that counts. That's on the computer, right?
Well,
Where'd that one come from?
this is July 18th. We don't have a September 19th
Okay,
approved minutes
Gotcha.
because that's what we're going to approve today.
yeah.
And that approved minutes should say that this passed, but we don't have it was voted on 600 and passed. We don't have the details, so I don't know what to do with this, but we could, at this moment, say that we are approving the July 18th minutes as they are sitting on the web, approved. Does that make sense? Pass them
Well,
on.
once just since you're being very officious about it, see who was here on the 18th to revote, if you want, that clarifies it.
Or we could table the minutes until our next meeting and go back and watch the video,
Well, that's
Yeah.
possible, too.
because the video is online.
Oh, shucks.
Okay, on July 18th,
just an
I was here, Lionel was here, Dan Jones, Rod was here, Trevor was here, and Warren Biggins was here.
Is that a quorum of the people who are here now?
That's a quorum, yeah. There's 5, 6.
What do you want to do? You're the boss.
He's the boss.
Oh, no, you're the real boss.
I don't know. It just seems very odd that it would show up in the minutes as failed. I've never failed to approve minutes in my lifetime. So we now have
and I
talked
wasn't
about
here.
it, and the recording
that's the next
secretary can listen to this and decide to change it, I would guess.
Or we can check the TV.
Yeah, I remember, I wasn't here in July. I wasn't at that meeting, so I don't remember who was here, but
I would guess there could have been a technical problem with the recording, that this went blank or something long enough for him to say it didn't pass.
Paul, are we meeting in January?
I would suggest not.
Okay.
Well, we have discussed it, and that will be a record for the person who is looking at the meeting minutes for December. So is there a decision we want to make about this comment in the draft minutes? We believe the motion would not have failed.
I'm sure it would not have failed.
Yeah. Okay.
Could we ask the secretary to look at the TV and see what the motion would happen?
Yeah, I guess.
Why don't we do that?
I'd be more comfortable tabling the minutes until we can
Yeah.
definitively, somebody can watch the video and see what the vote was.
Okay, so we're motioning to table the minutes, and we're going to take a vote on that. Is everybody,
I vote yes.
yes?
Yes.
Aye.
Unanimous vote to table the minutes until we resolve this issue. And I guess that vote is There's no abstentions, and there's no counter vote, so it passed 100%. Okay, well, was there anything else people wanted to bring up about these draft minutes? I know you pored over them and thought they were all perfect, but anything anybody wants to think needs to be corrected? Okay, so that's the minutes of September 19th. So the next item on the agenda is an update on river issues from Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Huber. I've got several things to talk about, a couple of things to talk about today, but first, and why we had scheduled this meeting a few months ago was to talk about the feasibility study for the Exeter Reservoir, high hazard dam again, and how we were going to, what our findings are for improvements to increase the discharge capacity of that dam because we can't meet the high hazard requirements at the moment. We thought we would be at the very end of the analysis, and the funding for this was obtained through New Hampshire DES. I think it was one of their high hazard ARPA funding mechanisms that for about $172,000. I thought we'd be at the end of that. However, things are taking a little bit longer time, and we did get a 3-month extension. So this project, funding-wise, and the funding is 100% through DES, we've got until the end of March to finalize this grant. So we still have great information for you. Some of the delays right now is we're waiting for review of our emergency action plan and also the operations maintenance and response plan that is sitting at DES right now also. So with that, we have Stephanie Huddock from VHB. You've seen her at most, if not all, of the Pickpocket Dam presentations, and she's been here quite often. Jacob, Jake San Antonio, that you guys know well, very well also, he's not in the area today. So Stephanie's going to walk through what we know about the Exeter Reservoir. We had a preliminary a few months ago. You'll see that some of these concepts are advanced further with additional details. So I'll just turn it over to Stephanie.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. So some of this is going to be stuff that you saw last time, so a little bit of a recap too. So just to reorient yourselves, we have the Exeter Reservoir dam just upstream of Portsmouth Ave here. And then here's the reservoir, and it's fed by Dearborn Brook, which I'll get into in a minute. And then it outlets into Wheelwright Creek that comes through this way and goes down and exits into the Swampscott. So a little bit more background. So a lot of times we reference this as the Waterworks Dam, and how this project got started was actually with the letter of deficiency on the Pickpocket Dam. So there's no letter of deficiency on this dam right now. It's really just the town looking at this on their own accord. So when we did that breach analysis back, I think it was 2018, we found that the dam does still qualify as a high hazard dam, but does not meet the requirements of a high hazard dam. So I think you've commonly seen me or heard us refer to the requirements being that a high hazard dam needs to pass 2.5 times the 100-year event with 1 foot of freeboard without manual operations. That has now changed to the 1,000-year event. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail and what that means for this dam here. So during a breach analysis, Portsmouth Avenue is overtopped, and then, so Portsmouth Avenue is overtopped. These structures here are inundated, and then we also have 21 Webster Ave, which is the sewer lift station that's also flooded, so that's what qualifies it for a high hazard dam. So that's why we're doing this feasibility study right now, is to evaluate options to bring this dam into compliance. And then this picture here, you can see this orange line is what under existing conditions, what the 100-year peak water surface elevation is during non-breach conditions, and then that blue outer line here is the peak water surface elevation extents during a breach condition, and then this dashed blue line here is actually the FEMA-regulated floodplain, which doesn't always align with modeled results. So some quick facts about the Exeter Reservoir Dam. Like I said, classified as high hazard and in poor condition. Poor condition because it doesn't meet the requirements. It's a concrete face dam with a steel sheet piling. That steel sheet piling extends about 10 feet into native soils. 10 feet high, about 250 feet long. The top of the dam is about at elevation 23.4. This spillway here is kind of what you consider a labyrinth spillway, so it allows water to overtop along these edges here. The last little bit is cut off here. The elevation of the concrete portion of the spillway is at 19.65, and these stop logs are put in to increase that elevation to 21.6. Actually, never mind, I'll talk about that in a little bit. But so the hydrologic analysis here, so like I said, this dam impounds Dearborn Brook, has about 1.75 contributing square miles of watershed area. That watershed area includes some of the commercial development surrounding the dam too. There's commercial development that outlets into the sluiceway to the east there. We did an analysis of the future rainfall, similar to what we saw in the Pickpocket Dam. So we removed the 2.5 times the 100-year event in this table from the last time you saw it. We'll have a figure on the next slide here to show you how that compares. But the 100-year or the 1,000-year water surface peak flow rates are lower than what we saw with the 2.5 times. So on the Pickpocket Dam, that was a much larger watershed. We saw the 1,000-year flows being much larger than the 2.5 times the 100-year, but this being a smaller watershed, we see those being actually smaller. So it is watershed dependent. And that was what we had heard from DES too when those rules came out. So it aligns. So this is, we'll show you, you can see here, this pink line at the top is the water surface elevation over the dam for the 2.5 times the 100-year for the future conditions. And then you can see this green line is the future 1,000 year. So that rulemaking does help us out with this dam modification analysis. Those flows are much lower. We do, in our model, we are influenced by tide elevation, so our downstream tailwater condition on our model is 3.29, which is the elevation of high tide there. Our current spillway capacity, which you can see our little shape here, we model this as kind of just being flat against it, but you can see in that picture that was before where it was more of a labyrinth zigzag shape. So that existing capacity is about 135 CFS. That sluiceway capacity going downstream of the dam is about 1,000, has a capacity of 1,000 CFS, but that required spillway capacity needed to meet the requirements would need to be around 3,000 CFS. So we started with some what we'd call pre-design aspects of the project. First was a stability analysis. So we completed some borings. So we went down to about 41 feet. So you can see the different strata differences here. So we have embankment fill for the first 7 feet. And then we have native soils, or what we consider native soils, between 7 and 35 feet. And then we got down to glacial till at 41 feet deep. We found that the embedment depth of that sheet pile cutoff wall, which like I said, it was 10 feet below native ground, to be sufficient, and the concrete wall is. So there's no stability concerns with the dam at all right now. That downstream slope, though, it does not meet the required factor of safety. So that will need to be something that's looked into more detail once an alternative is chosen. So like Paul mentioned, we completed an emergency action and operation maintenance and response plan. Those need to be updated every few years. So we provided an update on that, and it's in DES to review. So the things that are included in that emergency action and response plan is these inundation maps, and it's hard to read on the small tables, but what these tables include is information at all the key cross sections in the river, and they have information for both the sunny day flows and the 100-year flows. And the information included is the time to when that breach wave starts. So when you just start to see water surface elevations rising at that location, and then when they would be their highest, and there's also the associated elevations there. So we have that information going down the entire stretch all the way to where it meets the Swampscott. In that emergency action plan is procedures on what would happen if a dam breach were to occur, important phone numbers. Part of what we'll need to do when we finalize that plan is to test this emergency action plan as well. So DES reviews the models that we use to develop this, and that same model is what we're using to do this alternatives analysis. So DES typically has some comments and recommendations on those models, so it's helpful to get that review back before we finalize things. So we are really waiting on DES to get us that review back. So getting into the alternatives, so a few of the design constraints. First is we need to pass the peak flows from the 1,000-year event with 1 foot of freeboard without manual operations. We need to meet the slope stability requirements of the NRCS technical release. We have a few site constraints, one being the surface water treatment plant. I think you guys probably saw on that site visit, but this slope going down, this is the dam. So this is the dam right here. This is the spillway. This is that sluiceway that goes down to culverts that go under Portsmouth Ave here. So a few of the constraints is this slope is really pretty steep. So when we raise this dam up, we can only raise it so far while having this grade tie back into existing ground here before we're getting into the building. The next one being is this property right here, this condo apartment property, and then we have Wheelwright Creek Road here, or sorry, Waterworks Pond Road, sorry. So a few different constraints that we need to work with. There's no seepage drain present, so we don't need to worry about that. So with these different constraints, we're looking at options to increase the spillway capacity. So that's what this first alternative does, is we have a new labyrinth weir to increase the weir length to 120 feet. So with that whole zigzag distance, we have 120 feet of spillway distance there. And then we'd also need to raise the dam 3.5 feet. So you can see these lines here on this are the grading limits associated with that raise. So the grading limits for a 3-to-1 slope, so 3 foot horizontal for 1 foot vertical, that would bring us right to the edge of the building there. So we really can't flatten those slopes out anymore. So 3-to-1 can be tricky to maintain. It's a steep mobile slope. And then similarly, we want to make sure that the slope going into the reservoir isn't too steep, so we would need to, dewater this area and grade this out and flatten the slopes into the reservoir as well. The water surface elevation stays at that 21.6 foot elevation. So with all these alternatives, we have the same operating pool elevation. What changes is the height of the dam changes. So the max water surface elevation during those larger storm events is what's going to be the changing thing with all these alternatives in terms of the water surface elevation. So the next alternative that we looked at was alternative 2, which is keeping the same spillway that we have today, but then just raising the dam. So we would need to raise the dam 5 feet in order to keep the current spillway. So that includes impacts to Waterworks Pond Road. We're slightly over the edge here, pretty minor onto this property, but we are getting into impacting the building here. So this was not an alternative that we thought was feasible bringing forward for further analysis because of that impact to the building. It seems minor, but we really can't steepen up this slope more. And as if you remember, the town is talking about, I think, has that RFP been selected, Paul? Has a consultant been selected for that water treatment plant?
Yeah, so the town, through their warrant of this past year, has monies to start investigating what we want to do for a surface water treatment plant. And there will be several components of that. One is there anything we could do at the existing site and still get a good treatment plant out of it? And then it would also look at a different location for the surface water treatment plant. The RFP has been out. We did get a proposal, and in fact, we just had an interview yesterday on that proposal or the qualification statement. And so there'll be more to come on that as we go through that process. But the consultant selection to look at the treatment plant is moving along.
So with that, this could be a viable option depending on what happens to that surface water treatment plant. So it's important to still talk about. The next alternative that we looked at was installing these articulated concrete blocks. So essentially, we would allow for water to spill over the dam, but the dam would be reinforced by these articulated concrete blocks. Due to the slope requirements for those blocks, it would require extending all the way into the water treatment plant here. So in terms of existing conditions, this one's a non-starter, but could be looked at as an option if the water treatment plant were to be relocated or moved in this area. With this alternative, we would still need to raise the top of the dam 2.5 feet, so we still would be impacting Waterworks Pond Road here. But you can see we don't need to grade into the reservoir here. So alternative 4 is kind of a combination of all the different options. So what we have is we have some partial articulated concrete blocks here, and then we have a partial dam raise. So we'd be raising the dam on this side here 2.5 feet, and then where the blocks are, those would be raising about 1 foot, and then we would be including that increased capacity labyrinth weir here. So because on this previous, the alternative 3 as well, because of these blocks being designed to overtop, it would be directing water to the water treatment plant. So this is where we would need to do some flood proofing along here to make sure that the treatment plant is protected during those large events when it is overtopping. So looking at some cost comparisons between these few. So that first one, which we have, is raising the dam and adding a labyrinth spillway. It comes out to about 4.1. Raising the dam and leaving the existing spillway, we have about 3.8 million. Raising the dam and just providing overtopping protection along the entire length, but that was impacting the whole water treatment plant. It's about 2.6 million, 2.7 almost. And then that combination of alternatives with the overtopping protection, labyrinth spillway, and raising the dam are about 3.5, 3.6 million. So you can see the cheapest one happens to be the one that's kind of not working under existing conditions. So then the other ones are relatively in the same magnitude of costs here. So not a clear winner in terms of cost-wise. So some of the elements that we looked into with all these alternatives, what's hard is that there's not a lot of difference in terms of, I know on Pickpocket we had the modification alternatives and dam removal, which has much different impacts in terms of environmental impacts, infrastructure impacts, things like that. Here, Like I mentioned before, our water surface elevation is staying at that 21.6 foot elevation, and it's really just those temporary impacts from larger storm events, which would have the difference in impacts. So in terms of our permitting for all the different alternatives is the same. So we have our wetland permitting, we'll have our Army Corps Section 404 Clean Water Act permitting. Those two are submitted together. With the wetlands permitting, that's when we talk to the Heritage Bureau, Fish and Game, conservation commissions, and then we have the Exeter Swampscott River Local Advisory Committee on here. I actually don't think we're impacting enough river length that we would need to coordinate with URSLAC there. Some additional permitting that we would need to go through. We'd trigger the Section 401 certification. We are still doing enough work within the protected shoreland that we'd have to go through shoreland permitting. Depending on which alternative we choose, we might impact enough area to trigger AOT. AOT is triggered by 100,000 square feet of land disturbance, and there's some special considerations for when there's disturbance within the shoreland. We would need to go through DES's Dam Bureau's safety review, and then we would likely also need to do a letter of map revision. I don't know if you remember on that one of those first slides, I showed you that dark blue dashed line that was the FEMA regulated floodplain. With these dam modification alternatives, we likely would be impacting that 100-year floodplain elevation, and if we changed it more than a half of a foot, then we would need to go through this letter of map revision process after the construction of one of the alternatives. So in terms of infrastructure impacts, we talked about some of them a little bit, one being impact to that Waterworks Pond Road. Depending on which alternative we choose, it would be impacts between 2 to 5 feet where you'd have to raise that road. Regardless of that height, it'd be around in the magnitude of 150 grand. So not a huge dollar number in comparison to the overall project. But some bigger infrastructure issues that we do have is that sluiceway that I mentioned going down. That right now only has a capacity of about 1,000 cubic feet per second. Since the whole premise of meeting these requirements is to increase the spillway capacity, we would be sending more water down that sluiceway, and therefore this would probably need to be widened in order to adequately pass the flows. And then the other impact that we talked about was how alternative 2 and 3 have direct impacts on the surface water treatment plant, and that alternative 4, which is that combination of alternatives, we will need to provide that flood proofing along the building. And then the other piece is that the design storm requirement for passing water under Portsmouth Ave is the 100-year event. We, with all the alternatives, do not overtop Portsmouth Ave, but water does back up behind Portsmouth Ave and does start to flood this parking lot area and a little bit of the building. So that's a concern under existing conditions and would continue to be a concern under any potential future conditions. Impact to water supply. So we briefly talked about this at the last meeting, but prior to a couple months ago, the normal water elevation of the reservoir was actually 22.6. During our EAP development, we found that it was actually supposed to be operating with 2 stop logs. There were 3 stop logs in there right now. So maximum there being 2. So we needed to drop one of those stop logs, which reduced the operating level to that 21.6. So in theory, I guess you could say there's less water in there, but I don't believe it's been impacting any sort of operations. None of the modifications will impact the water supplies. The biggest impact will be to this intake structure here. So this elevation top here is at 25.9. Some of our alternatives are just a little bit higher. So we'd likely have to raise this structure to make sure that we're tying in and it's accessible with any of those dam modifications. But in terms of the intakes and outtakes in those structures, none of those would be impacts. So there's really no little impact to water supply, if any at all. Some of our environmental impacts, again, since this normal water surface elevation is not changing with any of the alternatives or compared to existing conditions, there's really not any impacts other than those temporary larger storm events, which is not something we typically look at from environmental impact standpoint. But some things that we wanted to point out here, we're not going to have any permanent impact to wetlands. So this is considered open water. This blue area is a reservoir and considered open water. And we have some NWI wetlands at the top of the reservoir here, but really no bordering wetlands along the reservoir. We found, based on our desktop review, that there's no impaired waters within that quarter-mile buffer around the reservoir. The habitat in this area is classified as open water with some bordering hemlock, hardwood pine, and Appalachian oak pine habitat upstream of the dam. There's no mapped essential fish habitat, and we're waiting our NHB data check results for any rare species that we would need to be concerned about during construction. So, not a ton to report. So then next steps with where we're going from here is we will be awaiting the DES's review of the EAP. If they have any comments on the model, if they do have comments on the model, then it kind of ripples through our results. So we'll need to update some of our maps and numbers there, and some of those figures you saw. We might need to make some modifications to what the final elevations are of the dam. I think we had talked about there about how some of the dam raises are like 3 feet, 2.5 feet. Those might change just a little bit based on DES's review. But once we get those comments back, we'll update the schedule to be able to provide to you guys for when that feasibility study will be completed, and hopefully get that done as soon as we can. So that's our update.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we contemplate that there would be more to say in February? You said January would be too early to have a...
No, I wouldn't suggest even considering another meeting for this committee until after the town vote in March. So it would be either late March or maybe even April.
Wow. So there's nothing to be gained by hearing how the process is flowing.
And the feasibility wouldn't be finalized until end of March.
End of March.
Yeah.
So we're thinking April is the next meeting. Right?
That would be a good time.
It's good to hear that this project's moving along. Are we working off of any kind of timetable when it comes to either grant funding or I mean, I know there's no LOD currently on this structure, but...
Yeah, the original grant deadline was January 1st.
Yeah.
We had gotten an extension for that a few months ago, knowing that the DES review time was going to be a little bit longer. So it is, I think we submitted that mid to early October, so still waiting on comments for that. So then that new deadline is going to be 1st of April, so we had 3-month extension there.
And is there any other portions of that after that point that we know about at this point, or?
I don't know what you mean by that.
I mean, I'm just didn't know if there was anything already in the pipeline for moving beyond that point when the grant comes to an end. No.
No, we got to decipher this. In fact, I'm sitting here learning today also. You know, I knew general stuff, but I've seen more specifics. And now that you have this up here, some of those other infrastructure impact costs, I'd eventually would want to see
Yep.
those added to those too. Also, you asked me about the water treatment plant. We have it as a task early on for that particular consultant, undetermined yet, to review this report. They know about it. We even talked about it yesterday. But you can see where the implications of options here are really going to affect layout of what they can do at the existing site. So the consultants that we choose for the water treatment plant will be definitely looking at this report and folding this into their analysis.
So there's a deadline, April 1st, when we would have more information about how it's landing, and we would meet third week in April to discuss that. Is that the idea?
Well, there might be nuances of this, depending if there's any comments, but you've got a pretty good picture of what that's going to look like unless there was the changes because of the hydraulic analysis.
Yeah.
For sure, when it's finished, it'll be on the town website for the full review of the full feasibility study.
Yeah.
Yeah, these alternatives are pretty set. Any comments we get from DES will maybe update the numbers by a tenth or two, so not super significant. But in terms of like the feasibility study component of it and looking at what each alternative means for its impacts, since the normal pool elevation doesn't change, there's not a ton there in terms of upstream. It's not like we're changing any habitats or impacting different infrastructure pieces upstream. And in terms of the downstream impacts, they're all pretty similar. Under existing conditions, the Portsmouth Ave culverts back up and impact the parking lot and buildings. We're going to see that same thing happened under these proposed conditions. So in terms of impacts, they're all relatively similar. So I think a lot of it is looking at the alternatives to see which one makes the most sense. And like Paul said, that plays into what happens with the treatment plant.
Okay. So the
I have a question.
plan is April. April. Yeah, sure.
I think you mentioned about halfway through, about here, maybe a little after this, something about tide.
Yep.
How does that figure in?
So that tide elevation is 3.29, and our water surface elevation of our dam is, let me go back to it, is 21.6.
Excuse me,
Yep.
you know this so much more than I do. I'm figuring a tide is like with salt water and the swamps.
Yeah.
That's my question, like, it's a lot more basic.
Yeah, so that 3.2 doesn't, so our elevation of our parking lot there is at about elevation 9. So and in terms of a very downstream condition, it does impact the water surface elevations versus if it was just zero, like
Sorry,
nothing.
9
but-
feet above sea level, is
Yep.
that what you're talking?
Yep.
I'm in first grade.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
9 feet above sea level
Yep.
is, okay.
Yep,
I
and that
gotcha.
tide elevation that we looked at is 3.2926 feet above sea level. So in terms of the model, in terms of way downstream, it does impact. But in terms of like the salt water piece coming back, it's not something we, I guess, are looking at there or need to look at.
Yeah, here, let me jump in. So you've got, what'd you call it, headwater? No, what's the downstream?
Tailwater.
Tailwater conditions. So that means there's already an elevated river channel. There's elevated flow because the tide pulled in. So if that tide wasn't there, you'd have more area for the flow to go through. So when the tide is up, using some of that, now you've got to even build on top of that for your analysis flow. So it's holding back some of the water that wants to flow through because it's already high. So that's what is meant by that.
Thank you, that clears it up. So it's a bigger catchment area or some bigger area that we're talking about rather than just here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where the
And
water gets to go, yeah.
But it affects what happens here, though, too, because it backs it up.
Yeah. Yeah, our model continues all the way down to the confluence with the Swampscott there. Yep, Dan.
What phase of the tide are we talking about?
High tide. So we're looking at it under worst case.
Normal high tide or?
Normal.
High tide floods the parking lot?
Normal high tide. So that it does it flood the parking lot?
Here in town, parking lot goes underwater.
The one at the treatment plant?
No.
Oh no, no. This would just be the normal high tide. I'm not sure what.
Extreme high tides in the
Yeah.
river occasionally.
I'm not sure what elevation it is that floods the parking lot. I'm not sure if that's different. I can look into that and we can report on that in the feasibility study. And I guess it'll be up to Paul whether we want to add that highest tide into the analysis or
Same
not.
tide, you've got a couple extra feet of tide. and
Yeah.
What's the effect of that going to be on?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Downstream.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
After receiving my tax bill, I don't think money is a problem. Har, har, har.
So where are we? Do you have another?
Yeah, we go on to item number two,
Item two,
if you're
okay.
ready.
We're ready.
I'm not ready yet. Stephanie's going to do things.
No, I think we've heard about
one
this
do it first?
before.
That one.
Okay. So the Public Works Department put on a information session on Pickpocket Dam. It's been a while since we went through the feasibility study. It's been a while before we had direction of which alternative to do. We are in the process of looking for funding. So to keep pickpocket in front of people, we held this information session. And VHB attended with Jake San Antonio, Peter Walker. You might remember him. He was here through one of the presentations, but also a big player with the Great Dam Project. And then Stephanie was also there to help. So what I thought I would do, and some of you folks were there also, is just quickly go through what was talked about. And again, we had wanted Exeter TV to videotape it. They were unable to do it. So I thought it would be good to at least show who's ever watching at home this presentation because the other one wasn't videotaped. So the agenda was really what was the history, quick review of the feasibility study, and what the next steps were. And then we also had specific breakout sessions at the end of it where people can go up and ask the engineers questions that are on their mind. Project history, we know about that already. Feasibility study, I invited folks to go and review this if they so choose. It's on the town website, and it's a thick document. We, again, acknowledge funding partners, and quickly, the alternatives that were mentioned in there was raising the top of dam, and when you do that, you had to go into other properties with the tieback walls. There was the labyrinth weir again, that zigzag shape that adds additional discharge length for the dam. There was also a way for the spillway to be extended on one side of the dam so that flows could go over that particular section to increase the discharge capacities. And of course, there was the dam removal in this sketch you've seen many times. It also gave people a rendition of what the potential look would be. There was a couple slides each of that. And then there was a little bit of talk about this slide with the dam being removed, how the water surface level changes in the impoundment. On the top, you see the light blue of where it is now, the darker blue where it would, the location would be with dam removed. And then on the bottom is a profile which is cutting through the center of the river and looking at the difference in elevation throughout. Starting at the right-hand side at the Pickpocket Dam, the light blue is the existing water surface level, and the dark blue, and you see a 9.4 feet figure right there, is how much the water surface elevation would drop. You can see a 5 foot, about a quarter of the way through, and then it goes up to nothing as you hit Hague Road. We also talked about there was an effort in the study to see if you can go back to a lower classification. And also removing some of the dam, but not all, and seeing what that implications were. Then there was a little bit of talk about the basically two types of alternatives, not the two alternatives, but two types. One is removing the dam, and the other one is modification, and what it had for environmental, social, and economic impact. This slide was right from the report in 2024 dollars, and basically it pointed out that any of those modification scenarios is about twice as much as a dam removal project. Next steps. This is where I took over and said that we are working through a CIP, a capital improvement project through that particular program, where we estimate costs, and there's a little write-up, and if you went to the CIP for 2025 to 2030, you'd actually see this page in that document. Any project that we are proposing that is of a larger dollar figure would have a similar type write-up. We talked about three particular grants. One is Great Bay 2030, and the due date for that full application was this past Monday, of which we put one in. And the dollar figure for that is to mostly cover the design and permitting costs. The next grant will be due in January 9th. That is the Coastal Zone Management, Habitat Protection and Restoration Grant. And we have that on our radar to put in an application for that. We will be applying for the full amount of both design and construction in that particular grant, because the selection notice for Great Bay 2030 will actually be after the application due date here. And then last year, you're familiar with the NOAA grant for barrier removal for restoring fish passage grant that we did not get. That is coming around again, and an application is due in February for that one. Talked about engineering and design and all the steps that we'd need to go through for that. And just like Stephanie talked about some of the environmental permitting for the Exeter Reservoir project, we have these similar and probably a couple more for the Great Dam project because it is the removal. Also, a cultural resources permit would have to be done, similar to the Great Dam project. And then we wanted folks to know that we successfully navigated a project like we're talking about with Pickpocket back in 2013 to 2016 when we actually did the construction. And these were just photos pre-project and during project. You can see the breaching of the dam on the left-hand side. You can see up in the upper right-hand side what it looks like. It's not pretty when you first remove the water from the impoundment. And also you can see the construction happening down on the bottom right-hand side. And We were very fortunate to have a drought conditions during that, and you could see the entire Exeter River flowing just to the left of those sandbags there. So it made it pretty convenient for the contractor. And this is what it looks like today. So also talked about public engagement, how the town would be committed to reaching out more on these projects. And we started with this presentation back when there was no requirement to have one. We just wanted to keep it in front of people, tell them where we're at. But I also pointed out that any updates on any of these meetings or any of these analysis can be found on the town website. We have to solve this discharge problem at Pickpocket Dam, and we're under a request for action to have that completed by December of 2027. The schedule that we have laid out includes trying to secure funding for the project, and you can see that construction activities are not even planned until about the July timeframe in 2027. Breakout sessions then occurred, and there was three tables. One was environmental and permitting, the other one was engineering and design, and the third one was erosion and sediment control, where people could go look at a couple of billboards that had some bigger blown-up plans and to talk about their concerns. And that was the hour-and-a-half information session.
Because it wasn't on TV, if it's not already, any handouts or this presentation or whatever, can that be available on the website for folks that were unavailable to make the meeting?
Yeah, this is on the website.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
Yep.
What was the turnout like?
There was
Filled the room.
about 60 folks that showed up. Right when the presentation started, there was 51 people in attendance, not counting consultants or town folks.
Yeah.
But more were coming as the presentation was going on, so roughly about 60.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was well attended. Yeah.
And the people invited were the people that surround the Pickpocket Dam area, right? I
Well,
mean,
everybody was invited.
Well, that's
It was
true.
on the town website. We talked about it at select board meetings.
Yeah,
But specifically,
yeah.
there was a little over 200 letters sent out
Yeah.
to folks around the impoundment and just a little downstream of the dam also. And sent out specific letters, but in the letter, there was also where you can find meetings, you know, the front page of our website that has all the meeting times and what the agendas are, and it also listed the River Advisory webpage of where they can find all of the documents, and also that most of our meetings are videotaped, and you can find those in several locations, including YouTube.
Yeah.
And
It was a good turnout.
in addition to the letters, we reached out to our counterparts on the Brentwood Select Board to give them ample time to notify their folks that we were having this meeting.
A question. You might not know the answer. There was a lady who lives she's from Exeter, lives downstream from the dam. Twice she came in and was quite concerned about her foundation of her house. Did she get an answer to that? It seems obvious to me there's not a problem with this, but you know she got the answer? You wouldn't have the
You'd definitely have to be more specific, because that could fit the bill for
Yeah.
several folks. Yes.
Okay, I would imagine
Yes.
she did.
But during the design, too, it gives us a heads up on where potential issues can be, that during the design, there'll be more investigation in those areas,
Yeah.
and even potentially some monitoring, too.
I remember doing the big dam, there were some people that never changed their mind, even after the engineers told them very clearly, the flooding was not caused by the Exeter River, it was caused by the stream coming into the Exeter River, which was running in flood stage, and therefore taking the dam out made no difference. But anyhow,
It makes a difference up until about a 10-year storm event. We haven't had a big storm again. But your point will be noticeable if we do have a big one again, that it wasn't a cure-all for flooding. And you know that over there at the PEA, too, of the implications of that. Okay, anything else?
Okay. Where are we? Do you have a item 3? Nope.
No, my item 3 would have been the Great Bay 2030 initiative, but I touched it that we met that deadline.
Okay. Well, I guess the next line on the agenda says other business. Do we have other business?
Yes.
We have
I
other business.
think some time ago, before COVID, there was some discussion, this has to Dan's point about the flooding in the parking lot in back of the Stillwells and by the boathouse. My memory is that there was a new law, a state law, that said if we put in remediation or dams or some kind of water control construction, that it would be some sort of tax credit at the municipal level. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? This was some time ago, and so I bet there's a research assignment for me.
is it about taxes?
My memory, and I could be wrong on this, it could be dreaming, but my memory was that this state law said if there were construction to keep back rising sea level, that it could be like a deduction by the landowner who did it. And that's all I can remember. Paul, do you have any memory of this?
No, it's not.
To what I'm referring.
Okay, we'll look for.
And even if we don't find that, I think it might be interesting for this committee to start talking about the flooding that's happening near the boathouse.
Yeah.
Just to bring it up and talk about it.
Okay. Other business? Any other business?
I guess just a
Is there-
plug for the deliberative session, which is February 1st, Saturday, 9 o'clock at the Exeter High School gym, because certainly the pickpocket dam warrant article will be discussed, so.
Say that again, February 1st?
February 1st, 9 a.m. at Exeter High School.
Thank you.
Was there a request for action coming from down there that we need to take as a motion? You said you wanted us to take something up?
I hadn't thought about making it into a motion. I thought that magically people would remember this along with me. Why don't we ask that the minutes say that I brought it up as a potential agenda item? I don't really have any motion. I wanted to get it, so we can be talking about the flooding that's happening down by the boathouse. That's the issue,
Okay,
just generally, as a committee.
yeah. For discussion only.
Yes.
And this 9 a.m. Exeter
High School.
High School. What are we calling that?
That's the deliberative session?
Deliberative session. Oh, I get, yeah, that'll be in advance of the March vote for a deliberative, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, deliberative session. Okay, public comment. Seeing none, we're ready to adjourn the meeting, I think.
That's
And what's the date of the April meeting?
Be the third Thursday of April. I guess we should look that up.
The 17th is the third.
April 17th.
Okay.
Okay, so
I move we adjourn.
A second.
Lionel moved and
Terry.
Terry seconded, and we're going to, let's see, does anybody want to abstain? No abstains? So how many people are in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
I believe it's unanimous. Okay, I guess I have to do this. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you
Now
for
that you
tuning
guys
in
have
to
this down
Exeter
to a
TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 6 and 22. Channel 6 is your channel. If you have an idea for a program, want to host your own talk show, or submit a